We are being televised, and where the open meeting laws have been modified for purposes of social distancing, all votes tonight will be by roll call. And we'll turn it over to Sewer and Water Commissioners for Articles 8 and 9. We'll start with Article 8, which is the Water Enterprise Fund.
Mark, before we get started, is Walpole Media recording?
I saw them online.
Patrick, are you on?
He was earlier. May have stepped away.
Yes, you are live.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so Mr. Abbott, do you want to start with sewer and water?
Okay, is Bernie and Rick on?
We are.
Yes.
Okay. Did you want to cover the both the expenses, Rick or Bernie? If not, I can tell what the effect of the budget for this coming fiscal year has on the water, the expenses.
That's fine, Bill.
Okay. In a total, the expenses for FY21 are down from the previous year by about $260,000. On the individual expense items, the increases are very small, like 0.88%, 0.42%. There was one that was 3.5% higher. The most of the reduction was a result of we did not have any capital planned for 2021 expense side, so that accounted for most of the reduction. In terms of, do you wish to go on in terms of revenue, Mark? Or?
Well, yeah, because the rate forecast is a significant jump. So yeah.
Yes, I wanted to cover that. This was on our last and actual the first meeting that we had since the emergency was declared. We actually started at a much higher rate, and by working it down, we got at the end of the meeting to this 7.06%. There's a couple of reasons. One, actually the most important reason, is the consumption estimate. In prior years, at least going back to fiscal year 17, we were using our consumption estimate of 88 million cubic feet. In December, we had learned that that was not, that was overly optimistic. And in fact, looking back at then, we were actually consuming 85 million. And then in FY18, it was down to 80.9 million. And when you got to 19, it was down to 78 million. So our rates that we were calculating were not covering our the targeted revenue that we intended to raise by rates. And fortunately, with all the construction, the entrance fees were covering that deficit up. In December, we learned that that trend was going to continue. And if I remember correctly, the deficit looked like it might be around $700,000. And we're quite concerned on that. And that's when we started to actually monitor the production from our wells as well as the revenue. And we could see from the wells standpoint, for the previous 16 months, we were pumping about 10% less month on month, which explains why we, obviously, if you don't pump it, you can't sell it, nor people need it. So the big change was reducing the consumption estimate to 73 million. And so when you take the expenses, which they went down a little bit, but when you divide it by a much lower number, you're going to get a higher number. Since that, we've still been working on the rates, and I'm expecting on our rate hearing that an alternate proposal will be made that will reduce the rate to 4.79% increase. The everything that you see on the sheet that Jim provided would be the same, except for the contribution by water retained earnings. The change was moving that from 300,000 to 400,000, and that was able to bring it down to a more satisfactory concern. One of the things that both of the proposals are expecting that we're not going to be doing capital expenditures again, and that's somewhat of a concern because there are things that need to be done. Some of the things that this commission board approved, like upgrading the SCADA system, and we only started on that, and those things are going to be falling back by a year. So, but we need to, the important thing is we have to be able to predict accurately what our consumption estimate is. And I've looked at where we stand for the first 10 months and then projecting that out for the final 2 months. And that 73 million cubic feet looks like a good estimate. So, of course, things like weather and others always play a role, but it's certainly better than sticking with an estimate that we knew was definitely off by a long way.
Do you know what the pumping is to date for this fiscal year?
For this fiscal year, actually, if you hold on 1 second, I'll bring that up. Well, for this fiscal year, they are down, and can I get that? Okay, this fiscal year, and through the end of April, we're at 646,714,000 gallons, which should have to equate to cubic feet. Yeah. But the key thing is that's what we've pumped. That does not take into consideration the fact that as part of the treatment process, as well as running the system, you're going to actually use some of that water. But the thing that it's important to note is that when you compare these last 16 months, and I'm talking calendar year months at this point, and compare it to our historical averages, looking at, say, the last 3 calendar years, you can see consistently month by month, we're pumping 10% less.
Yeah.
I can't see everybody on screen, so if you have a question, just make a comment in the chat box and I'll call on you.
I can go on to sewer if there's no questions.
Got Andrew with a question?
My question is I see that Jim put in the chat the retained earnings for water is about 2.8 million, and in this budget you're taking 300,000 from retained earnings. Now I assume you could, if you took more, the rate increase would go down, right? And so I'm just wondering how you got to that $300,000 number.
Well, we actually there was many steps, as Marilyn can attest to, as she was on that meeting. As we started, I think it was like 14% and starting to work to get it down. The lower one would use $400,000 of retained earnings. The 300 would get you the 7%. And again, it was the 2 things you're looking for. One, attempting to bring down the rate, recognizing it's probably going to be a multi-year to get it at a much lower rate, without using more of our retained earnings than you want. Remember, we're not doing any capital work, and that's primarily, unless it's a huge project where we're borrowing, we're using the retained earnings to fund those. So we're fortunate that we have a lot right now, and we can afford to take out 300,000 or 400,000 without impacting our ability to do some of the capital work that needs to be done. I hope that answers your question, Andrew.
Thank you.
Okay, I got Mark Sullivan.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I have a question. So, as the water department is, even though you're substantially pumping less, your costs are remaining relatively the same. In other words, most of your costs are kind of fixed. So even if you're pumping less, you're not significant cost savings.
That's correct. You need to have certified technicians to run the treatment plant. Bernie, you could maybe talk more. I mean, the two big items are electricity and the chemicals. So the electricity to run the pumps as well as the treatment plant. The rest is things you need.
Exactly. Those costs are pretty much fixed costs, and that's what we actually have to expend to run and produce the water that the town needs.
Okay, thank you.
Josette, and then Brian.
Okay, I have two questions. The new construction downtown, there should be occupancy within the next 6 months in varying degrees. How will that affect or not affect your water? And my second question is, could you give a dollar value to, you're saying 7% potential increase, 4% potential increase, in dollar and cents, what does that actually mean to the average bill taker?
All right. Well, looking at the 4.79%, because I figured that question, and that's
Would come up.
yeah, and I think that there's a chance people liking lower numbers rather than bigger numbers, that has a better chance of being the one that, and we can always come up with something else at the rate hearing, but so far those are the only two. If you were the typical person who uses maybe 6,000 cubic feet for the entire year, and I base that on when I built the inclining block rates, I did a sheet that just showed where the high hump was and where, and it was at that around 6,000 cubic feet for the year. And that would come to $3.56 per quarter for a typical home. If you use a little bit more, and we're not talking somebody who, waters their lawn and all.
Correct.
In terms of the construction downtown, yes, there'll be some impact, and obviously there's no landscaping with those projects, but they seem to be going awfully slow to me.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not counting on a whole lot.
Edison held them up a long time.
Yeah, and a lot of these projects, there's just strange things that happen. I mean, you could look at the Burns Ave, which before was going to be, I think, 14 units. Then it turned into 32 of 40B, and now it's going to be 40 units. So something that you would have thought would have been already online isn't. Up in my area, West Street, Renmar Road, there was a 103 unit AQV. They would have been well underway constructing, except for the election occurred, and they just didn't have the final vote. And once the election on the planning board took place, they needed to have to present things because they needed a special permit, and you needed 4 votes, and they didn't have 4 votes who had heard the whole thing. So those sort of things can happen. So I'm not counting a whole lot, but it'll be a pleasant surprise if any revenue that does come in.
Okay, my final question is, are you going to be continuing with the block rate?
Yes, that's my intent.
Okay.
All right.
Good. Thank you.
Brian?
The question I was wondering, Bill, is compared to similar towns in similar situation, maybe as best as you can, where does that 7% increase put us compared to these other towns that might be similar? Are we in line? Are we higher? Are we lower?
I don't know. The only information that we use is the MWA has a annual rate survey that they show. And I can tell you, I was looking at that when I developed the inclining block rates a couple of years ago, and our numbers fit pretty much in the middle. So I don't know if that would have changed, substantially. And when I say that, I was looking for like the 12 communities surrounding us, not somebody up in the North Shore or, you know, or the city of Boston or whatever. The other thing, and Rick always reminds me about this, is, you know, every system's different. We have 2 treatment plants. That's good. But there are other communities that don't. And I think, you know, people who have been with the, lived in the town for a while can remember when we only had one that really, you know, had some deficiencies, and we had complaints of the water quality. So, you know, it's hard to compare, you know, system to system because we're all different. You know, someone like Canton takes water from wells like we do, but they also supplement it with the MWRA water. No, it's totally MWRA. So it's hard to make a comparison. It really, from my standpoint, is just looking this year versus last year and comparing and seeing, you know, what are you doing and why.
Thank you.
Sean?
Yeah, so I think my question is around how, you know, we've the town reduced the amount of water that we pull from the system, which I think most of us would agree is a positive thing. You know, we're conserving our resources, and that's a good thing. Increasing rates, though, that's not necessarily a good thing. I'm just wondering the balance there. You know, essentially, I think what you're saying is that if we use more water and we weren't worried about conservation, then we wouldn't need to worry about rate hikes. But on the other hand, now that we're being conservative and we're doing a good job with that, we have to incur rate hikes. So that's the first part. And the second part is, you know, with this being a continuing trend, have you looked at other ways to generate revenue to, you know, not have to continue to look at rate hikes year after year to get up to a point where it's sustainable?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed, and I mentioned that the last 16 months, we've been down 10%. If you look at the last 4 months and compare them with the prior year's 4 months, they're, for the most part, fairly even. So I don't think we're going to see a continued drop, particularly as Josette has mentioned. At some point, we're going to start to get some more consumers, and that's going to start to allow us to spread those fixed costs. And like I mentioned, you know, you can't operate those treatment plants without having, you know, certified and trained plant operators. And, you know, we need them the same number, whether we're producing what we're producing now or, you know, say 15% more or actually 15% less water. I mean, there are just certain fixed costs that, you know, you have to spread them over the gallons that you expect to sell. The other thing to keep in mind is, yes, it would be great maybe to sell more water, but one of the things that the DEP looks at, and particularly for our water withdrawal permit, is is your residential use more than 65 gallons per person per day? And we've been, in the past, we've been just over, some years just under. And if you go over under what they're proposing for our new water withdrawal permit, you're going to have to be ordered to reduce the number of days that in a week that we allow outside watering. And that sort of, you know, is sort of a gating or governing factor as to how much you could sell anyways, because people who like to water their lawns instead of 2 may be down to 1 day a week.
Absolutely.
I don't see anybody else with questions. This is an article that we need to vote on. So at this point, the proposed budget is $5,960,357. Do I have a motion from anyone for action on this item?
Motion for favorable action.
By Denny,
Second,
seconded by Josette or Susan?
Josette.
Josette, thank you. Alrighty. What's before us is favorable action on the Water Enterprise Fund. I have to do a roll call vote. I'll start with Andrew,
Yay. Yes.
Josette,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Denny,
Yes.
Ally,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Mark Sullivan,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
Jeff.
Yep.
And myself is a yes. 15-0-0, motion carries. Thank you. Now, I understand Bruce is here. Does he want to chime in on something specific, or does he want to wait till after we do the articles?
You can just go through your articles, Mark. Thank you. I don't want to interrupt the flow of the meeting.
Alrighty. Then Article 9, Sewer Enterprise Fund.
Okay, again, I believe the information that you were provided showed a 0% change on the sewer. And just like the water, we're expecting an alternative to be provided, and that alternative, which was the original presentation from the administration, will show a minus 2.48% decrease in revenue. And like sewer budgets in the past, it really amounts to what is the MWA assessment going to be. That amounts to about 80% of our total expenses. And they're in fact down, the total is down over $1 million from the previous year. And I believe that is related to not doing, or I believe it's capital is the difference there from the previous year. I don't have that sheet, maybe I do in front of me, but so the reduction is the MWA reduced their assessment. Our operation is a very small operation. We just own the pipes in the ground, but all the treatment is done by the MWA. So I don't know if Bernie or Rick, if you want to add anything. Again, like I said, there will be a second alternative presented at our rate hearing.
Basically, this is historic. This is basically what we have for what we need to run the existing system that we have.
The individual expenses are increasing by, I look at 1.5%, 1.45%, 0.5%, that sort of thing. And like I say, the big drop was the MWA assessment.
Hi, this is Rick. The driving factor with the whole sewer budget is that the MWRA assessment was reduced approximately $165,000 from last year. They had projected a 3.8% increase, and their increase was only 0.7%. My only concern is that in future years, that assessment is going to come due. So to have a 0% increase or a negative increase, you're going to see big spikes in my opinion, in the sewer rates in future years. That's my only concern.
So this might be a case where the majority of the board may decide to go with the 0%. I just wanted to make you aware that there is an alternative that will be presented at the rate hearing on June 8th.
I have a quick question. Similar to the water, you have a consumption estimate. Is that based on outflows through the system?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
That number was just checked as recently as yesterday, and that 52 million cubic feet is a good number. The two biggest contributors are Hollingsworth and Vos and Siemens. Hollingsworth and Vos has showed a slight decline in their discharge. However, what they are no longer discharging, Siemens is.
Okay.
So it's a net wash. So that 52 million appears to be a good number.
And we have a tiered system on this between commercial and residential, or is it flat rate for everybody?
Just a flat rate for everybody.
Okay.
I mean, it's something we can look at, but water is where we first looked at it, and it's what most of the other communities in the metro Boston area who their inclining block rate is related to the water, not the sewer. So.
Okay. I see Mark Sullivan with a question.
Just a general question. How is it determined which houses go on sewer? Is all new construction sewer, or do they have the opportunity to do a cesspool leaching field? How is it determined who's on and who isn't?
Well, the sewer system is what it is right now. It's been quite some time since the town has extended the sewer system. Most extensions that occur now is a result of a developer, having a subdivision that happens to be close enough to the existing sewer system that it's worthwhile for them to connect. So obviously, if you were adjacent, then you're just connecting your pipes. If you have, say, a small subdivision, say 3 or 4 units, and it's a mile away, you're probably saying it's not going to be worth the developer's cost to bring the line down and from his subdivision and connect to the existing sewer system. So,
does Walpole have any in the system?
Pardon me?
Does Walpole have any thoughts about expanding the system, or is the system pretty much the way it is now?
We do have a draft sewer master plan that I've looked at. It's like about 1.25 inches thick. And as best that I could see, almost every place ended up being sewered. It was going to take, decades to do, and huge amounts of cost. Now, there's two thoughts on extending the sewer. One is that obviously you address a disposal issue of how to get rid of waste. The other side is you're taking groundwater from Walpole, because we provide all of our groundwater comes from, that we supply people comes from Walpole, and you're taking it into homes and businesses, and then you're sending it down the sewer out into Boston Harbor. So you're in effect somewhat depleting our groundwater as opposed to recharging. So that's the benefit of continuing to have on-site septic systems. There hasn't been much effort to, like I say, interest in expanding the sewer system. It's usually done by developers who probably are working on, some marginal, lots, and putting them on sewer makes them buildable, or at least a lot easier to build rather than putting on-site systems.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, is that master plan the one that was drafted about 21 years ago with like 18 phases?
No, this one is more recent with about 18 phases.
Yeah.
But it even that one plan did not have a whole lot of, as I remember it, in lengthening the existing sewer system. There was a lot of places where you were going to have individual grinder pumps within the homes and a force main that would bring it to what we have right now for sewer. There was probably some areas where the sewer system would be extended, and it prioritized, this neighborhood versus that, and there was probably 17 or 20, phases.
Yeah, the one that I remember was the one that had in phase 2, the people between South Street and Route 1, which is all high ground, being 100% sewered. Is like, but we're high ground, we're in a recharge zone. It didn't make sense to take water directly over the recharge zone and pump it into Boston Harbor. So,
yeah.
Josette had a question.
Yes, the assessment from the WRA, is that the actual bill or is it an estimate from them?
That is the actual assessment that the MWRA Advisory Board has already voted.
Okay, and my second question, it's a little off topic. The DEP grant, is that open-ended to apply for, or are we missing a deadline for that as a result of what's occurring?
Which DEP grant is that, Josette?
That we were going to apply for, the $70,000?
Yeah, we'd still be eligible for that in the fall.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on Article 9? Okay. Article 9 is for Sewer Enterprise Fund with a budget of $5,147,299. Do I have a motion?
Motion for favorable action.
By Denny,
Second,
seconded by Josette. Okay. Andrew had to step out. So Josette,
yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Denny,
Yes.
Ally,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Mark Sullivan,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
and myself is a yes, 14-0-0.
Okay,
Thank you,
thanks.
Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
You don't need us anymore?
I believe we're all set. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, Jim,
Yes,
municipal budget. Actually,
Sure, so-
operating budget also covers schools.
so we have the fire chief, police chief, and Bridget, Mike Frischer, and I see Nancy Galvin. I'm not sure if Bill Buckley's on here with us. I also, they're here to answer your questions, whatever you may have. I also took the opportunity, as Mark suggested a couple days ago, to kind of review the FY20 compared to the FY21 budget. So you'll see in the memo there, I really outline what the numbers are, and it's about a $1.5 million increase, and that comes out to just about 1.5%. And I highlighted where the increases were, which is the reserve fund, police department, fire department at 247, Tri-County Voc at 210, and the schools at 766. So it's really those five locations in the budget that have really gone up. Everything else is either decreased or level funded. So I think that addresses some of your questions. But Mark, would you like to go to schools first or public safety?
Let's go to schools first, because their number's just a number. We'd like to kind of see how it pieces together.
Sure. So just first, thank you. We're extremely grateful for the fact that we had the opportunity to present our FY21 budget for 2 sessions. It seems like that was ages ago, before the current crisis hit. And it really gave you a sense of what our priorities are and what the concerns were for us at that particular time. But we know, obviously things have changed. And I just also wanted to mention that we're appreciative of the honesty with which Jim Johnson has shared this information with us during these recent weeks. It's been unsettling, to say the least, but at times like these, it's the honesty that really matters. And we're aware of the fact that we need to look at the budget, not only, with FY21, but an eye with FY22 as well. So as we know, in February, when we came to you with the request of the 2.2 million increase, and that was a 4.8 Jim Johnson, came back with it was a 3.92% increase. And so what that was approximately $1.8 million increase over FY20. Today's reality, as Jim mentioned, we're looking at a $766,000 increase. So, we look at that as approximately a 1.7% increase. So what's our total cut? It's where we have a gap, it's 1.1 million. So how does this impact our budget and how are we, closing the gap? So the first step we did is, we had to remove any of those new positions. So if you remember those positions that were in the middle column of the PowerPoint I showed you, those had to come off. So we had to remove those. Those were like our counselors, the Walpole High School positions, the ESOL support. So that was right there, about 520,000. Second, we froze any possible spending. We had to we froze our budgets, and we also realized some savings from the school building shutdowns. Third, Mike Frisha negotiated some savings from unused transportation contracts. Some of that, as you know, which was offset by refunds to families for the rest of the school year because they were not riding the school bus. Next, we furloughed 118 people, but have tried very hard to avoid layoffs. So we did that. Fortunately, and then also, as usual, we have the attrition due to retirees. So our goal is really to, cut with the least impact to student learning. We expect to receive about $100,000 from the Federal CARES Act that was passed on March 27th, and that was their first stimulus package. It's just important to note what's not in this budget is any additional costs that's related to opening and operating our schools in a COVID environment. The rules have not been written yet. I was just on a conference call with the commissioner, and they're going to be sending us, they think Monday at the absolute latest, a list of what schools they're recommending and some guidance for schools of the equipment that we will need to purchase for our students for school opening. We also know that when we reduced our budget by over $1 million, that we are using a fair amount of one-time money. We know this is something that we're going to need to consider through this crisis. We have been involved in conversation with the teachers union with the possibility of asking for concessions, but we know we're gonna need their cooperation in FY22 budget. So we continue to meet with them on a regular basis. So we know that the unknowns are a difficult part. When you look at all that, we still do have, we were able to do all of that, and we have a gap of, I'm looking at my board now, 106,959. So we're looking at continuing to close that gap with everything that we've done. So the things that we're most concerned about, obviously our students that are most vulnerable, some of those contingencies besides, opening up for the fall, we're looking at summer programming. We're going to be providing summer programming for our students. We're looking for all the students. We feel like we need to close the gaps in K through 8, opening that up, and then working with the high schools for some remediation in 9 through 12. So again, we've got to look at those students that really struggle with remote learning, and then the changes that we need to make, with enough planning time on when that guidance is released by CDC and the state. What we're not concerned about is the diligence of the teachers and administrators, the resilience of our students, and the ability to work together. So that's just the information, and I'm sure we're happy to answer questions. And Mike is also here along with school committee members.
You mentioned the use of one-time funds. That's primarily whatever you were able to save off of this year's expense budgets that you're going to roll over to cover next year?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Denny.
Yeah, hi. So at this moment, we're planning on the schools opening, is that correct?
That's a great question, Dennis. When we get guidance, we are planning for a fall opening. We right now with summer, with like ESY and we're going to come out with this tomorrow, and Friday, what we're looking at is more of a, unfortunately, remote learning, but more a robust remote learning. And Bill Hahn is working on that as well, to provide that for the kids, to make sure that they're able to be engaged and close those gaps. But you know, we're planning on what the contingencies can look like in the fall. And what's really tough is you're planning on a full opening, you're planning on a remote and a full opening. We don't know what that would look like. So what's really tough is you're planning with from multiple contingencies. So needless to say, it's been busy.
That's what I'm just trying to figure it all out. Now, if you go to a staggered, student, like certain students come Monday, day one, another students come day two, and switch in and out. Are there significant impacts to the budget if you're partially open compared to not opening at all to fully opening?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, the first thing is, well, if you do a partial opening, you're looking at also personnel, because if Walpole does a partial opening for certain students, and the next towns where teachers work and their children are home, how does that work? So we really feel that there's got to be some consistency across the state here to get this accomplished. Also, transportation. We have questions of what is transportation going to look like. They are this morning when I was on the conference call, Ed Davis, the former commissioner.
No, Ed very well.
He is working with us. So he has given a list of even like PPE materials that he is recommending for schools to have, and just came out with that today. So I'll be sharing that with Mike. And they're going to get us a list so we can go ahead and start putting that together and determining what that would look like. So there's all those contingencies. It's not only the physical and structure contingencies, but we have to look at instructional learning and social emotional learning as well. So there's three parts of it that we need to really be able to work together.
Okay. And you said you hope to have that next week. Is that what you said from the CDC?
Well, the PPE materials, they're looking at getting to that on Monday. They're looking next week to giving us guidelines for summer programming. But we can only wait so long. We can't put something together in a week. So we've already started planning that, and they think by mid-June they're going to give us guidelines for opening.
Okay, excellent. So, thank you for all the work. Some crazy times and all the contingencies.
Thank you.
Definitely not business as usual.
No, heck of a first year, but at least it's a first year in this situation for every superintendent in the state. So
let's pray this is the toughest you'll deal with in your term here.
You mentioned summer program. The guidelines have been spotty for summer camps. Can you use what's come out with regards to summer camps, with regards to gathering sizes and transportation, to kind of start molding your summer program?
Well, everything's outdoors, and some of our summer students can't be outdoors. So we have to really look at indoor facilities. But, they're going to come out with their guidance. But right now, I know, like with our ESY and other programming, we're looking at, moving forward with remote and getting those plans in place.
Well, one of the things for summer camp programs is no bus transportation. So,
right. And our ESY students, many of them need that transportation.
Yeah. Let's see. I have Kathleen and then Brian.
Through you, Mark, to Bridget. I know you can't give numbers, but when you talk about kids who just don't thrive in the online environment, can you talk about percentages? I mean, are 50% of our kids not getting it? Are 5% of our kids not getting it?
I can't give you a number, Kathleen, it's a good question. But what the teachers have been doing is that, students that might not be doing the synchronous sessions, or if we have students that aren't showing up, the principals and even our secretaries are reaching out to talk to find out what's going on and how we can assist them. And sometimes it might be, I have 3 children at home, all under the age of 9, and on 3 different computers, and we'll say, okay, would it help if we Xerox information for you and sent that home. So I think it's just working with families to be engaged. I know the middle schools, at one point, the parents had, some parents had mentioned that they didn't have enough to do, that they felt like that some of the students were craving for more. So for example, the teachers and the principals developed almost like a summer academy, an enrichment academy, with all different unbelievable enrichment activities that they could do through the end of the school year, through STEM, through art, through music, and different teachers would run it, and they would have a certificate of completion. So it's getting to find out where they're not engaged, and then our job is to work with them on how to engage them.
Just as a follow-up, I guess my question is more the amount of intervention that's going to be required in the fall. Are we looking at a lot more kids who are going to need help to catch up?
Well, it's going to depend. It's going to, like John Quealy's we're looking at, our students with special needs and working with those parents to see where they may need some support. We're looking at reaching out to our EL parents, and then just our general population. So right now we don't have, we'll know when school starts and taking a look at where they are, as they come in, and we're going to have to meet them where they are and see what kind of, gaps need to be closed. But I have to say for the majority that a high percentage are participating in synchronous sessions in the online learning. And that's, due to the fact, and thanks to FinCom for helping us get through the one-to-one. Boy, because if we did not have one-to-one, I've had other towns that have had a lot of pressure, and they've called me to say, how in the heck did you get one-to-one? And what are some ideas that we can do in order to make this happen? So by having the one-to-one at that middle and high school level, that allowed us with some of the Chromebooks in the elementary level to deliver, all students at least 2 through 5 who needed them. So we are at a much better place than we would have been if we did not have the one-to-one initiative.
Brian, Allie, and then Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Bridget, I just want to say thank you to you and the staff for pivoting so quickly, and you for your communications. They've been very timely, so thank you for that. I think you had said that there was 118 staff that were furloughed. And has that been the same, or has that number changed? Has it been level? What's the status of that?
No, that's the same. I'm going to let Mike talk about that to furlough, because I know that he was very active and involved in that, taking.
So the reason for the furlough was specific to the revolving accounts mostly, where we had extended day and food service who are dependent on revenue collections from operating the services. And then all of a sudden we found ourselves in a position where there was no more revenue coming in, but the payrolls, which are very large, were continuing. So immediately we saw there was going to be a concern. We wrote it out as far as we could, but keeping in the back of our mind that if we develop a deficit, especially in food service, we have to pay that back to that account before the year end out of the operating budget. So it was an impact to revolvings, but it would also impact the operating budget pretty dramatically. So we looked at all different strategies. We streamlined as much as we could, but the reality was we were going to have to, furlough the staff. So we designed it as best we could. We informed them about what unemployment was. What really helped us was the federal dollars that gave everyone an extra $600 on top of their 50%. We worked with Jim and his team to kind of hash out what unemployment costs as a self-employed entity for the town of Walpole is, and then move forward with it. We did the best we could to let people know and soften the blow of it, but there was no loss of a sense of what that meant to these people, and that concern was very deep for all of us.
Okay, thank you. And for the unemployment for these individuals, which budget will that hit? Will that hit the school budget, or is that the general budget?
So that was the general budget. Jim and I talked about that at length with Bridget as well. And Jim had agreed to take that on initially. If our projections, which include of the 50% the town owes, 25% was going to be refunded by the state as part of COVID relief. So the 25% remaining that we would owe these employees, if Jim struggled with that, we were there to supplement or to carry on our share absolutely throughout the entire process. Most of these employees will stop claiming at June 19th, which is the last day of school, because they're 180-day employees. If that continues, which we hope it doesn't, because they normally wouldn't collect anyway, I will be there to work with Jim and make sure that the finances are in order.
Just to follow up on that one, right now we're charging all the furloughs off to the COVID-19 account that we set up about a month or so ago. That allows us to deficit spend in unemployment and anything COVID related as far as expenses and personnel costs. So we've been documenting that all along, and we haven't gotten a bill for unemployment. February is the last bill we had. So we haven't gotten anything from March forward. And we're not the only town who hasn't gotten anything on that one because they've just been so overwhelmed. The people are getting paid, we just haven't gotten our bill yet. So we're mindful of that, and that we may eventually have to make that up, but we'll come up with it one way or another, especially with this, some of this COVID money that's supposedly coming to the town. Right now, the town has 2.2 million coming to it, but we're not really 100% clear on the restrictions on that and everything else. It just says Walpole's getting this amount of money, and it's left at that, and Jody's working her way through it. So I'm not as worried about it. We do have a lot of people on furloughs, though. I mean, what did Bridget say? 100 plus on the school side, and on the town side, 118, yeah. And on the town side, we have 20, 25. So that's the most in my 16 years here that we've ever done, all really at once. But we'll work through it, and we'll cover it one way or another.
Thank you both.
Okay, Ally?
Sorry. Thank you, Bridget, for everything the school's doing. As working with 2 elementary schools, it's pretty amazing. Elementary school students, it's pretty amazing what we're getting done. My concern for the transition back is a few things. The state has promised the regulations, but I know in the early childhood side, they were supposed to come out last Friday, and we still have not seen them. I am concerned about the communities nearby, if all the superintendents are working together to have a cohesive plan. And if we are able to get students back, what we're doing as a town to start really thinking not only the deficits of the general population or special education students, but the social emotional needs that the young students will especially have in the middle school and high school. I mean, we had some great positions that we're hoping to start next year, and unfortunately that's just not possible. But I think the needs of our students are going to be greater than ever, and we're going to be working with a very tight budget.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great point, Ally. Just in terms of, you're talking about the, with the guidance and the superintendents, we meet regularly. Like I have my, it's called the tech groups, and those are the groups that are around me. That's like Norwood, Natick, Wellesley, Needham. I have another one that's more of like a South Shore group. Also, just the whole superintendent's group. I have a weekly meeting with superintendents, and also that we have formed through MASS our own working group in order to tackle this, because we know that we're not going to be able to do this alone in a silo, and that we have to communicate and we have to work together. And yes, social emotional is one one of the forefronts. Like I said, when you're looking at the different pieces, you have that instructional core, you've got that social emotional, which impacts the instructional core, and then you're looking at also what does your structural component look like when you're actually coming back to school.
It's no matter what we're facing, it's going to be difficult for our students to get them back in and get them feeling comfortable and safe with the new norm.
Agreed.
Mark and then Doug. Excuse me.
So I'm looking at the school budgets, and I know that we reviewed a budget in February that's been kind of blown apart. So your budget last year was roughly the 46 million. Now you're getting an increase of 766,000, about a 1.6%. Do you have that like itemized as far as what you're going to spend that money on?
You want to take that, Bridget?
Yeah, we do. Yep, go ahead, Mike.
So yes, we do. We have a worksheet that we've been working on with the school committee since this COVID situation began. It's constantly evolving in that there's negotiations going on with contracts, there's reductions in services. So you're trying to nail down something that's moving and trying to make accurate projections. But we've been working with a spreadsheet that lists, just going back to what Bridget had mentioned earlier, the mandates that we talked about. So the special ed services that we have to, the tuition increase that we had to work with, our Medicaid grant decrease that we mentioned to you earlier, and then obviously our collective bargaining. So I've kind of built a budget starting with what last year was, just started over and then added in the 766 that Jim had provided and rebuilt it with covering the absolute essentials and then working our way forward. It's really about all essentials at this point that have to be covered, and we eliminated everything, which was what we proposed earlier in the year. All those new positions are gone. We just cannot do it. And we're, in addition to that, we're using, Bridget mentioned also earlier, one-time money to cover. So the carryover and the attrition figures that would have been helped us, next year are absolutely being dedicated to getting us through to next year with this new revised 766 number.
Okay. My other question is, you mentioned that your COVID-19 estimates or what potential impact that could be is not in the budget. Is that correct? Like buying PPE requirements or something like that?
Yeah, and that's where the grant funding we're hoping the grant funding from the federal government will assist us with that. We don't have it built in. I've been purchasing as I can as I move along. As we see PPE become available through vendors that we have, we're trying to purchase it. We've been giving it to Jim and his team so they can claim it for reimbursement. But there's not a lot out there. It's been very hard to get things that were very easy to get in the past. And now we're looking for more guidance, which we've been hard pressed to find, to basically choose what we really need to have. We're looking at, for example, plexiglass shielding in all of our schools. So we did a walkthrough of all 6 schools and looked at areas that are critical to having that type of protection. And we've designed with Donnie Anderson, spec'd out, designed, and have sent it off to a plexiglass company, a firm that makes these custom, to have these built. Regardless of what that cost is, we're going to have to incur it and figure it out after the fact. And that's that lack of predictability. But I'm pretty confident that will fall within that bucket of COVID relief from the federal government. And then in addition, we'll have to buy more disinfectant, more wipes, and all those kinds of things times 7 schools. So it will be very costly, but we're doing the best we can.
Right. So I guess, Jim Johnson, my question is, we're putting about $250,000 into the reserves. Could that money be used to cover these kind of unexpected costs?
No, I propose that we not use that money. Right now, we're allowed to use the COVID account, and I would have all this stuff charged off to the COVID account. You just made me think, when Mike was talking, every week I touch base with Melissa and Liz and everyone else for town meeting and the town election. How are we doing? I want to have as much stocked up for Clorox wipes, sanitation, and everything. So whenever we can have the opportunity to get it, we do get it. Mike is correct. It's hard to get, even if we order it through the police department, it's not always a lock that we're going to get it, or if we use our special code on Amazon. So no, I'd like to continue to charge it off to this COVID account that we set up. It's allowed. It's been encouraged by our auditors to do all this to maximize our reimbursement. And I see Jody shaking her head, so I'm right on, right, Jody? Okay, thumbs up, okay.
Right, yeah, it's just getting back to, what we talked about last week. And by the way, your memo highlighting those key areas like public safety, the tri-vocational school costs, so that when we go to the town meeting and tell people, here's the budget, this is what it was this year, here's how it's increased, here are the costs that make up that increase. I was just looking for something that talked about the reserves, and we put aside reserves as well because there's unexpected costs out there. Okay, no, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, Doug?
I had a question about the meetings that you've been having with the secretary and your other superintendents. Was there any mention about what might be expected for Chapter 70?
No, they're still waiting. You know, they look at, you know, what the percent of the cut is. Is it going to be, you know, is it looking at a 10%? It's almost like the same thing that we're hearing, you know, in terms of, you know, looking what the revenue looks like. They haven't pinned down numbers. It's just, you know, town to towns are looking at what their budgets are. And then obviously, you know, trying to fill the gap for where they need. So they have not come out with a number. We're waiting. They keep telling us that as soon as they know something, they'll know. We have another a meeting with them next week. And when they don't know, they'll come out and say, you know, we're working on this and we'll let you know where we're at. So they know. They have not come out with a definitive number yet.
You had mentioned that you guys negotiated costs with the bus company for some unused transportation. Are we still paying the bus company for anything?
Yeah, so we're covering their fixed costs for their operation. So when we talk about yellow buses in particular, they gave us a 48% reduction off of the full price of the contract. That's the highest I've heard in the state from all my peers. So we were really happy with that. Connolly Bus and Steve Sullivan at Connolly Bus did a very open-ended negotiation with 15 towns. I negotiated with Medfield directly because I was having conversations with them anyway, and I wanted us to get the best deal possible. In the end, we all got a 48% reduction, so we're very satisfied with that. But we are providing reimbursement. We are paying for the fixed costs. Same applies to the Vanpool company, which does our special ed transportation, as well as YCN. Vanpool does our out-of-district, the ones that we don't do, and then YCN does our in-district. Vanpool kept their employees on, so their reduction was 22% because they were still carrying their employees versus Connolly, who furloughed them. And YCN furloughed their employees as well, and their reduction was 37%. So I think we did pretty well in negotiating there, but we are still paying them. But there's a fair amount of savings in all of those line items because we're not paying the full contract costs.
Contract costs. Okay. And finally, I guess I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what are you hearing for the fall? Do you think we're going to have smaller class sizes? You mentioned the plexiglass, or the, you know, what's being said in your, you know, peer groups?
We haven't had a definitive answer. Like they said, they're going to come out with guidance, and they're saying in mid-June. I think we've pushed back because we said we can't get guidance in mid-July. It's just, you know, we can't put things together at the 11th hour. Like I said, we're trying to plan on contingencies, and we're having those discussions even before mid-June, that what are some possibilities of what schools could look like in openings, but they haven't given us any guidance of what we're able to do through these phases in terms of schools opening.
Okay, and one last thing, I guess, in your opinion, are we kind of jumping the gun by setting a budget now as opposed to in a few weeks when you know more, or are you comfortable with the 766?
I think we need to set the budget now, to be honest, because we need to be able to have those numbers and then move forward. And then, you know, later, you know, if or when things happen, then we'll deal with it. It's just, I think that we've had a lot of uncertainty, you know, through all of this, and, you know, to set a budget will give us, you know, one sense of certainty so we can move forward and start planning.
And just to jump on back to that, we want to set the budget now, so at least on our side and on the school side, we can let the principals know this is what you have for next year. This is what you can expect. I can let police and fire know this is what you can expect. If we need to make changes in the fall, we'll make the changes then. You know, I'm very confident that if there's further cuts, we will be able to absorb it. So much so that in addition to the 400 that I mentioned, I think Mark asked me, what's your backup plan? We talked about the 400,000 for the school, for the high school project. We've sat on that money. Yesterday, the selectmen awarded 4 contracts for Blackburn Hall restoration to the front columns, Old Post Road office lobby, Blackburn Hall renovation, I cover that, Boyden School brick restoration, and the high school partial roof replacement. We took all of that money, we used old borrowing articles that were focused on these, and we saved an additional $565,000. Could we use that money in the future on the rest of these buildings? Certainly. But in addition to the 400, I've got another 565 to make up for the gap. So I think we should set these budgets for now and adjust them in the fall if we need to. So.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions for schools. So thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Mike.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So should we change up the order and let fire go before police?
Your call.
Yeah, let's do fire first.
So just Mark, I know the chief's on here. I know both of them are. Fire, as I mentioned in my my memo to you folks, they're set to see about a $247,000 increase. That's primarily due to the hiring of the new personnel that were brought on in March. You know, I like to get creative, and that's what you saw with the police department, where their increase is really only about 64,000. The 2 new police officers make up about 58 of that, but I couldn't get creative with the fire budget because we already had the people locked in place and working for the town. So that's the real reason why there's such a bump up there. And, you know, it's a significant amount of, you know, people that we brought on to have. This is the most amount of firefighters we've ever had in the town's history, and I'm proud to say that. And we need the coverage here. So with that, Chief, anything to add before we open it up to questions?
No, that pretty much says it. It all started on March 13th when 12 of us were taken out here at the station and put into quarantine. 2 weeks later, we were out for 5 days. That test came back negative. We were all allowed to return to work. 2 weeks later, I lost 3 individuals. On a positive note, they had a cardiac event that they saved the person, but they were all exposed and had to be out. So they were out for a couple of days, the 14 days for them. And then 2 weeks later, I had 3 individuals that were exposed again and had 3 out. When the first event happened, Jim was gracious enough with the board to allow me to bring on the 3 individuals that we were looking to bring on later on next year as new hires. We brought them on immediately so that we could staff for the event. And those individuals have been working steadily since then. They've all been integrated onto groups now, and they're working with their individual groups. I'm attempting to get them into the fire academy as soon as possible, and we are thankful for that. And as far as questions, one of the things I heard the other night when you folks were on, I was watching, and one of the questions was with regards to Station 2. Station 2 was opened after that first event as well. Station 2 was open from 2006 to 2009, and then we had the layoffs in 2009. And I had to let 4 personnel go. 1 was a vacancy and 3 were actual bodies that left. They went to another department. 3 months later, we were asked to bring them back again. Only 1 came back, and it took us several years to get back up to where we were most recently with our staffing. Station 2 is currently operating with, when we first started, it was operating with 3 personnel, which wasn't really effective because what was happening was the ambulance would go out and it would leave 1 person sitting down there that wasn't really usable. So what happened was I went before the board and asked them if they would up my staffing by 1, which they did. My minimum is currently 8 by contract. They allowed me to go to 9, which I'm still operating at. And we have 2 firefighters on the engine and 2 firefighters in the ambulance down there, which is improves the safety and the efficiency of that station as well. Since we've opened that station has handled about 60% of the call volume, which has been all in their response district. So it is very positive having that station open. And one of the reasons we hadn't opened it prior to this is we didn't have the staffing for it. So that'll have to be something that'll be revisited down the road after we get through this crisis. But currently We are just gearing up for another potential surge, which you keep hearing about. We're trying to get as much PPE as we can. It has been very difficult for us to get PPE, even on the fire side, and we use a tremendous amount of it yearly for our regular operation. That has increased about tenfold. We have been successful to get some of it. We have other stuff that's on order or has been back ordered. Most recently, I did receive, and we finalized that today, some CARES money of $25,000, which we can allocate for some of our resources that we have expended money on. We're working with Jody and Marilyn on that as we speak. And the other thing that we've applied for is a grant. We did it on a regional basis with 11 other communities around us. And the reason we did, and it's for PPE, and the reason that we did that is twofold. One, it gives us a much better chance of getting the grant by going on a regional basis. And the second is that it's for $135,000 and the town would have had to have chipped in $13,000. We're going to take care of that. The Norfolk County Chiefs are going to take care of the match for that. So there'll be no cost to the town if we're successful in getting that grant. I can answer any questions that you may have.
Let's see here. Starting with Mark Sullivan.
So my question is, Jim, you mentioned that COVID-19 account that you're accumulating costs. When the firefighters have to go out because of the COVID-19, are their salaries able to be charged to that account?
We have been charging that off to those accounts and tracking it. We don't know if it will be fully reimbursed, but we're trying to get the full reimbursement.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, with regards to the current budget with several firefighters going out for prolonged periods, where does your overtime budget stand?
We will be fine and we will make it.
Okay.
And I assume that overtime is getting charged back to that COVID account as well, correct?
Yes, Jody, that is, right?
Yes, that is.
Thanks.
Okay.
I can hear you all, but I lost my screen. I'm trying to find it here, so keep talking.
Don't see any other questions for the chief. No. Lisa, did you have a question? I saw your hand jump up. Okay. All right, thank you.
Chiefs on this call. Basically, it's a $64,000 increase. As I mentioned, about $58,000 makes up the 2 new police officers, which we have starting on January 1st, basically a half year for each officer, each new position. Andrew, I know, has brought up in question whether or not that should go into the reserve fund. Just thinking through that, I think this is the right way to approach it, leaving it in the police department budget. And I'm saying that because, as I previously mentioned, we have the $565 that we've saved in the free cash appropriations from the last fall town meeting. We have the $400 from the high school, and then we have the additional money that I expect to be coming in for new growth to sustain a cut of another $1 million from the state aid if that happens. So I think if it goes into the reserve, it's going to be hard to get it out because you have to justify that it's an emergency, unforeseen. And you guys, we are all going on the record as we expect to do this. So I think we leave it in there, and if things are that bad, we just don't fill the positions. So with that, I'll hand it off to the chief. Chief?
Yes, hi, everybody. Thanks for having me tonight. So, you know, during the first meeting, I think we went over our strategic plan and what the Walpole Police Department was looking at to help us get into the future. And I know we've been working on that for the past few years to get us to where we are at this point, but we're far from done. You know, the 2 big items that we were looking to do was one was increase police personnel and to get us to that, up from that, you know, 1.4 or 1.5 police officers per 1,000 up towards, or at least as close to 2.2 officers per 1,000 as possible. And you know, that hasn't changed yet. That was our biggest priority, and then increasing the command staff or expanding the command staff was the second priority. And, as mentioned by the chief, the Walpole Police Department was also impacted by the current pandemic as well. We've had 16 officers that have been tested at various forms of exposure, officers that were in quarantine. And that was a tremendous impact on us. We worked our way through it, both sides of public safety. But, with what the impact of this whole thing with the economy and not knowing what's going to happen with the economy, when the economy tanks, our job actually becomes more strained. Our job becomes more demanding, more challenging as people, start to worry about their income, their job status, how they're going to pay the bills, and the added stressors in life. And those are the things that actually affect and impact what we have to deal with on a regular basis. Our mental health issues are again up this year. We're already over where we were last year, after it had already increased 100% over the past 3 years each year. So our mental health calls are up, domestic violence increases, violent crime and that type of thing increases. If we would go back and look at 2008, 9, 10, that time frame, we could show you the statistics. So the Walpole Police Department, our arrests were over 700. We had incredible amounts of house breaks, larcenies, that type of thing, because our economy was bad, and that actually had an impact on, our response and to crime in the community. So, substance abuse issues, that's affected. And aside from the calls, the incidents that we have to deal with, we're also still going to increase the size of the town. So we still have potentially 1,000 apartments coming online, and we need to be ahead of that, not behind it. This is an issue for public safety in the town of Walpole. It's also an officer safety issue, because our police officers, who I think I demonstrated like how many we have on each shift sometimes, we're increasing the size of the town. The economy's bad, so we may have to be dealing with much more, challenging times for policing. And all this whole dynamic can change the way the police department has to do our job. So it's crucial, I think, that while we had already gone through, getting the 3 new officers, we found a way to, reduce the budget by $122,000 from what we were at before, and still be able to get us that lieutenant for the command staff and the 2 officers, even though those 2 officers will be assigned, later on, come like January. And so, that's really it. Nothing, as far as we're concerned, nothing has really changed a whole lot as far as what has to happen with the police department. And it's I think it's really important that we stay ahead of this and not fall behind. If you again look at 2008, 9, 10, that time frame, we were extremely busy during that point, and we were down to 34 officers. And I really don't want to see something like that happen again, because it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe for our officers. And right now, I mean, aside from we've had 2 shootings within 100 yards of the police station in the last year. We've had homes get hit by stray rounds. We've had robberies, armed robberies. These types of things are happening. And while these things are happening, we're also dealing with a pandemic, and we're on the front lines and dealing with that. So I just look for your support as far as keeping us on the right path of what we've tried to lay down so far. And that's it.
I've got Denny first.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Jim or the chief. So what have we changed from what we originally planned? We've got the 2 coming on in January. We weren't adding to the command staff now.
So what we were originally proposing was 2 new police officers starting on or about July 1st, and another position to bump up the lieutenant position, bump up a sergeant to a lieutenant, and backfill that sergeant position. Like, I think we were proposing that sometime in like November or so. So we're essentially starting those 2 new people late and not replacing the sergeant position. Chief, that's right, correct?
Yeah, so originally it was 3 police officers and a lieutenant, and then we're still trying to get the 2 officers, and like Jim mentioned, a delayed time to get into the police academy. As we discussed in the meetings prior, we talked about, the timing of getting a candidate into the academy, and then that time that it takes for them to get through the academy, and then the field training officer program issues, which is another 12 weeks. And, it takes about a year to get that police officer fully equipped and ready to hit the street.
And are we missing an academy, or is the academy not operating through this?
We probably would be missing one. Typically, like, we have an officer that's in the academy right now from the previous hire, and they typically run from September, October timeframe, and then again in January, February timeframe.
And is there, one thing, my limited experience when I was in the DA's office in the late 90s is, I'll never forget, I had a case, an arraignment on a guy, it was in December 99, and it was 99-4500 case. He had defaulted on a case in 94, which was during a recession in December as well, and it was a 10,000 number case. So there were 6,000 more arraignments in 94 than there were in 99, and I was just, when the economy's down, so the more we could do to try to get those positions and that structure in place in the police and the fire department, because I know both, these are the groups that we're relying on the most.
That's right. And if you look at like our annual report, you'll see in there, like, look at the annual report under the police department and look at that 2008-9 timeframe. We typically make about 350, 400 arrests a year. In 2008-9, that timeframe, we had over 700, and that was a direct result of the economy not doing well. People struggling. People had a very difficult time. People are already having a very difficult time right now, mental health wise, substance abuse wise. That's not going to go away. Those things just get exacerbated when people are given more stresses in their life, and that means our job has more of a demand on it.
So I don't know where we would find the money, but I would say anything that we could do is probably worth giving it another review somewhere, but I won't push it too hard because I know you guys have already done a fabulous job at reviewing and trying to put it all together. Just offering my independent counsel there.
Thank you.
Chief, with the likelihood of no capital budget in the fall, what kind of burden does that put on you and your cruiser fleet?
Well, we usually we put our unmarks in there and probably a marked cruiser, so it could affect the fleet as far as a marked police cruiser.
I mean, do we have vehicles that are like up against their life? They're pushing 105,000 plus, or?
No. Typically, what we try and do is we aim to get them turned over like before the warranties and everything run out, every few years. And that's always kind of just been the practice. It's worked out very well. There have been times when, most of the time they're just in the operating budget. There's been times when, things happen, a crash or something like that, where cruises are down, and we push to get it done through capital. But that was a goal this year, to maybe do one through capital.
With the addition of new officers, does that mean you also need to set up at least another vehicle or two, or?
When we did the strategic plan, we kind of tried to demonstrate like where our fleet is, and along with a lot of other things, we're kind of like in the middle for area departments as far as the size of our fleet. We have things that help, like the motorcycles help. Instead of having so many police cars, we have a few motorcycles. We have bicycles. We've had the ATVs out this week, so we try and mix it up and get officers out there in different modes of conveyance. But yeah, the fleet is definitely too small to handle the size department that we have, and the mission that we're trying to carry out. So, but economic wise, I know that's going to have an impact, and it's going to be something that when we work through this, we're going to have to keep it as a priority.
So I'm assuming that under machinery and equipment, you probably have a cruiser replacement hiding in that 70,000, or to add a cruiser?
A cruiser and the motorcycle.
Okay, but we could do it as an add as opposed to retiring the other ones?
We could, yeah, you could, you know, if we want to go that route, like you're saying, like keep that cruiser in the fleet and just replace the other one outright. We don't get a lot back on them on the trade-in, so that would certainly be a good idea, I think, to something to look at. And just add that one to the fleet for a little longer. You know, we'll lose the warranty on it probably, and you know, but we got Tommy down there. He's really good at fixing stuff.
Okay. Other questions for the chief? I don't see anybody moving around. Okay. Thank you, chief.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Questions on any other budget items for Jim? I know we've had the material for just about a week to go through. We are looking at a budget of $95,900.
So Mark, just for your clarification, if the committee is ready to vote, which seems like you might be, I do have the motion there worded. I actually went back to the motions for town meeting last year and verified all these numbers. I put them in and then I asked Jody to verify them this afternoon. So they are good to go as far as we're concerned.
Okay, yeah, because I did notice in your summary that you had you got a $2 surplus of revenue over expenses.
Yeah, I'd really like that if that had a couple zeros in back of it.
Yeah, okay.
Mark, I just have one question for Jim.
Sure. Yep.
So Jim, this is in the DPW budget. Would there be money in there available to fix the compost site canyon that we currently drive over?
Are you talking about, well, I don't know what you're talking about because I haven't been in there in about 3 weeks, but we are cleaning up the compost site. It's actually pretty full right now, and Justin reached out just a few days ago. That actually is in Melissa's budget and Board of Health, and we're going to get a company in there to go in and chip everything. We don't do that ourselves. So is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about the roadway. Like, when you drive in, you see the river, the water that streams across, right where the pavement stops in the dirt. I mean, I have a truck and I literally like bottomed out, and it's like maybe it's a speed bump type of thing, and I don't mean to be facetious.
I will get it. I'm texting Rick right now.
But it's
yeah, Mark, that's something we can take care of in-house. That's not a problem.
Oh, all right.
We'll take care of it.
See how easy that was, Mark?
That was very easy.
In that case, I want a few things fixed.
Hang on, Doug's in first. Doug's in first.
Jim, I had a question about the 1/12 budget versus the full year. When was the decision made to do the 1/12 or the full year? Was that something the board made? Was that something you made?
I wouldn't say I made it on my own. It was in consultation with the select board, town council, Jody, Marilyn, Bridget and her team, and Mike, Deanne Bruce weighed in on it. And quite honestly, there's so much uncertainty with that. I'm just concerned with going the route of the 1/12. We talked about having town meeting. If we're going to have town meeting, we want to have it safe. And we came up with this idea of having it on a football field where people are going to be 15 square feet apart from each other and spread out, and it works. And I think for the 1/12 budget, it's a month-to-month approval. It's just not, you ask them, in June for the July, then you have to go back in July and get approval, like July 20th, get approval for August, then month to month to month. Because I did think about, well, can we just go this 1/12 route for the, until we get to the fall town meeting and limit to there. But I just, everyone kind of didn't think it was a good idea. We all were in agreement. Dan, you participated in that. You want to jump in?
Sure. Sorry about it. Took me a second to get the mute off there. Yeah, you know what? It's a great question. one of my first things was, we're not meeting until the fall. And we started going through those discussions. I've had a lot of discussions with other members of the Mass Moderators Association. As you know, there's a whole bunch of us, and we've had Zoom calls and multiple meetings. We're all sharing information. They put together a guide for, running a town meeting during a pandemic because the state hasn't issued anything. Bridget, I know you're dealing with waiting for state guidelines too, as that we all are across the board, as they're overwhelmed with what's going on here. But, a key thing with the 1/12 budget too is it's 1/12 is the minimum. So the town could be overspending too. So, there's other considerations to go in there, but the bottom line, it boils down to that 1/12 budget can disappear in any time. And when I say disappear, is that as soon as the state of emergency is lifted, and none of us expect it to be anytime soon, but once that state of emergency is lifted, we have to have a meeting in 30 days. So rather than wait and play that waiting game and trying to figure out, do we run on a 1/12 budget? When is it going to be lifted? When do we have a meeting? Do we have to have a meeting in July or August, potentially out on a football field when it's 100 degrees on the turf? I think we've all just looked at a lot of factors right there and just assumed that, hey, this may be the low point right now with COVID-19, and let's take advantage of this little window right here. Let's see what we can do to kind of go forward and at least get the town running until the fall comes up, and then we'll take it from there. Even if we have to, come back and have another budget adjustment, which is quite likely.
Yeah, and I guess that was just, I feel like we're kind of rushing this a little bit. I understand all the concerns. Administratively, the 1/12 is probably a lot. But with the state not really giving much guidance, with the schools not really having much indication of what's going to happen next year, I just feel like we're making uninformed decisions. I feel like if we waited a couple of weeks, we may have some more information. And that's kind of it.
And Doug, one thing I'll say that there are some moderators in towns that agree with you, and there are towns that don't. We've done surveys of it. Some of them are waiting as long as possible. Others are going forward ahead of us. They're meeting sooner than we are. So it's really just a best case decision of minds put together to try to decide, where do we land and what is the right decision. We won't know until we look back in history.
Right.
Well, the other thing too is that the governor can lift the state of emergency, and you got 30 days to put together a town meeting, and the State House still hasn't passed the budget. So you're not going to get any new revenue numbers. You're still going to come forward with what we think we have available to spend. So you might as well get it done now.
Yeah, I mean, Doug makes some good points, but ultimately you got to go forward and operate. You put the best educated information together. You reviewed it, you planned, you discussed it. We've been through all of this. That's what we're all here for. And if something changes significantly, we can come back and reevaluate and do all the things that we need to do to fix it afterwards. But at least it avoids some administrative nightmares going forward, or minimizes, hopefully.
I think we have a reason. So my comment is, and the way I've been looking at the budget, I've kind of ignored what we talked about in February. Is we're going to be on the field, we'll be in front of the townspeople, and basically, what's the story? So we had a budget of X this year. Next year's budget is going to be 1.5% above X. We don't know what's going to happen. No one's got a crystal ball. We have sufficient reserves put aside. So from a town perspective, we're not out spending 3, 4, 5% was reasonable. It's public safety, it's schools, it's other key things we have. There's some money in there for reserves. So I think we're being appropriately conservative to be able to stand in front of the town meeting folks and say, this is the best shot for us right now. Who knows what'll happen, what the state aid and other things will be, but at least it gives the town, where you can kind of put the stick in the sand and say, okay, we go from here, and if we have to change, we do. But again, talking with constituents around town, I think the finance committee has worked with the town administration, and we have a good, reasonable story as to how the town should move forward.
Yeah, my concern isn't so much moving forward. I don't have a problem with the budget as presented. I just, for me, it's more about the timing. That's all. I feel like if we wait a little bit, we're going to have more information. We're going to have better information. And that's not so much the numbers or the justification for increases or decreases. It's just more about the timing.
I would argue that the timing will never be right. You can wait forever. At some point, you got to make a decision and move forward and operate and run the town. Because 2 months ago it was going to be 2 weeks, then it was going to be May 1st, and now May, we're at what, May? I actually no idea what the date is. The 27th.
27th. Yep.
And we're still waiting for information. Most of our leadership in the state and the country don't really know what they're doing either. So, but a good plan, and we go forward, and just like every business and everyone else, you pivot and adjust if you have to.
Any other questions on the budget? Do you want a night to digest, or would you like to move forward with a motion on the operating budget for fiscal 21?
I would move forward with the favorable action on the operating budget.
Okay.
Mark, do you want to read it to the proper way?
Sure. Okay. So, move to accept the proposed budget, which totals, and furthermore, that the Finance Committee recommends that the town meeting vote that the town fix the salaries and compensation for elected officials of the town as provided for by the general laws, Chapter 41, Section 108, for their services for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2020, and the town vote and appropriate the following sums for operations of municipal and school departments and incidental expenses of the town for the fiscal year 2021, July 1st of 2020 through June 30th of 2021, that the sum of $95,295,902 be raised from the following sources. Raise and appropriate from taxation, $92,448,083. Ambulance.
85.
Huh?
85.
No, 85. Sorry. Ambulance fund, 761,000. Sale of cemetery lots, 13,000. Water enterprise fund, 1,283,691. Sewer enterprise fund, 440,126, and overlay 350,000. And we've got favorable action by Denny, seconded by Josette.
Second.
Mm-hmm. All right, Brian?
Brian, yep.
Brian.
Okay, to Brian.
All right. Denny and Brian. Okay. Roll call. Did Andrew get back yet?
I'm here.
You're there. Okay. Andrew, you're first up.
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay. Josette?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Denny?
Yes.
Allie?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Kathleen? Where'd Kathleen go? Come back to Kathleen.
Yes.
Doug?
Yes, I said.
There you go.
Space bar doesn't work.
Okay. Doug?
No.
Mark?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lucy?
Vote yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Yes. Myself is a yes. 13-1-1. Alrighty. That concludes the articles that we needed to vote on for town meeting. Jim, is there any update on the requirement of us getting a public hearing in?
No, I'll touch base with Lauren on that one.
Okay.
I think we should plan on it tentatively, and then we can, the Thursday before. But I'll work on an update from Lauren, and maybe even if you, me, and Andrew and Dan have to have a call with her or something.
Okay. Alrighty. This
Would we
meeting. Huh?
would we look to do that through Zoom or try to do something outdoors for that one?
So probably through Zoom. I've kicked around some ideas with our IT department. As far as like, I'd like to give some type of a budget message in some way to the town. And I am probably going to do that over Zoom. And if people want to ask you people questions, there's the chat function that we use tonight. They can ask it through that.
Yeah.
Or they can simply, I'll provide my contact info and they can email me live during the meeting. So I just have to figure out the logistics of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Let's see, this then being most likely our last meeting of the fiscal year, it's customary that we have a vote to authorize the officers to approve transfers after the fiscal year closes so they can close the books. Do you have a particular dollar amount in mind this year other than what we normally do is 5,000, Jim? Or do you think you're able to get
Jody,
by?
is it 10 or Marilyn, is it 10 or?
The cap was moved to 15, I believe.
I believe the limit has changed, that there's no limit.
Okay.
Wow.
So Mark, I don't want to go no limit. Is 10,000 reasonable?
I think 10,000 is reasonable. So I'm going to make a motion for favorable action that the 3 officers of the Finance Committee can individually sign off on any budget or reserve fund transfer for items that come up before the board between now and July 15th, at which time that will become void, and hopefully the new FinCom will be able to meet to address any issues. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Denny. Once again, roll call vote. Andrew?
Yes.
Josette?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Denny?
Yes.
Ally?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Sean?
Yeah.
That's a yes. Lisa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
And myself, yes, 15-0-0. Okay. So other than a public hearing, the next time we'll be getting together will be after the elections. 5 of us will have our terms expiring, so we hope to see you all back, but thank you all for your service. At this time, anybody have some final comments?
Just a reminder, Mark, I'm going to work on my letter for the booklet tomorrow. I've already started. Just could you get it to us by Friday morning?
Yeah, I've got it drafted. I just had to put the votes in and a couple of comments, so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all.
Alrighty.
Yeah, just one quick comment.
I got Megan first, and then Denny and Andrew.
Yeah, hi everyone. I just wanted to say that with my term expiring, this will be my last meeting with you all unless something really unforeseen happens. I am expecting a baby in August.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Josette. Thank you. I was excited to come in with my belly and have you all see it and I don't know, just have a laugh. But here I am in my dining room. I've enjoyed working with you all so much. You've been so welcoming and you taught me so much. So thank you. And now I'm on to my next adventure. We'll see.
You'll enjoy it. You'll be a great mom.
Congratulations.
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 I got Denny, Andrew, and Ally.
I'm good, but I'll just add one more congratulations.
Okay, Andrew.
I just wanted to add a thank you to you, Mark, for being such a prepared and thorough and fair chair this year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Give a thumbs up.
Ally?
I'm good, Mark. Thank you.
Okay. There being nothing else before us?
I just have one last comment. Sorry, Mark.
Okay.
Just wanted to again compliment and thank Jim Johnson, Patrick, and everyone there down at Town Hall that worked not on one budget this year, but on 2.
Many.
It's all together, keeping us focused. putting together the story for us. You guys did a great job. Thank you very much.
To Bridget and Michael as well.
Okay.
Yes, we'll give the reaction here. Yay. Thanks, Kathleen, for pointing that out. I didn't know you could do that. You need a motion to adjourn?
Motion by Denny, seconded by?
Second it.
Seconded by Kathleen. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained. Thank you very much for your time. 15:00, we stand adjourned.
Nice, guys.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you very much.
Everybody,
Aye.
thank you.